Now a brief clarification to a story we discussed on yesterday's program. Now, in our conversation about the new FTC rules banning fake reviews, we talked about how social media platforms handle the problem of those fake reviews. In doing so, we did inadvertently mischaracterize how Yelp in particular deals with consumer reviews. According to a Yelp spokesperson, quote, "There has never been any amount of money a business can pay Yelp to alter the reviews or the ratings. Yelp uses an automated recommendation software that applies the same objective rules to every business and does not take a business's advertising status into account. We, of course, at Rising regret this error." Now on to the news. Lara Trump, the co-chair of the Republican National Committee and wife to Donald Trump's son Eric, got into it with the Breakfast Club host Charlamagne the God on Tuesday. Let's watch that.
Donald Trump really was very beneficial to the Black community when he was in the White House. I will say I've never seen this man say a racist thing. I think the attacks are fairly... Why is that funny, Charlamagne?
I'm just like, it's hysterical. But I mean,
no, Charlamagne,
because people act like there's no such thing as Google or we don't have TV.
This is a man who, as I said in the beginning, was beloved by so many people in this country. Mm-hmm. And he was friends with everybody.
A lot of celebrities.
Jesse Jackson, by the way.
Please
his
don't
Rainbow
do
Coalition.
That. He had Black friends. That's not going to work out.
No. He let them stay rent-free in one of his buildings, the Rainbow Coalition, because he felt like at the time that was a very important thing.
Kudos to her for venturing into not particularly friendly territory. But Charlamagne the God is an independent thinker who I often believe it's worth listening to. We play a lot of his clips on the show. If he's going to say Donald Trump is racist or racist toward Black people in particular, that's a claim you should be allowed to make. You should also cite evidence for it. I don't know if they got into a specific argument or examples. Most commonly, I think when this charge is made, the examples brought forth have to do with how Black employees were treated in his businesses, for which there's adversarial and supportive reporting saying that's true, saying it's not true. I don't know what else they're pointing to, or maybe his specific behavior toward Kamala Harris, or that she's not Black, or what. I don't know why he got into that, but
I mean, I do think that there are things that Trump has either said or done that are racist, frankly. Going back, now this goes back to the 70s, and then people roll their eyes because it goes back so far, but he and his father settled a case in the 70s from the Department of Justice, which was about discrimination against Black tenants. Their applications were marked with the letter C for coloured. That case, as I say, was ultimately settled. Then you go to the Obama birtherism thing, which I think was implicitly and clearly racist. Mm-hmm. Then we can have the whole debate about Charlottesville again. And then I think we can say this, I don't think we have to bleep it out, the fact that he was reported to refer to shithole countries, which were all Black majority nations during the time he was president. You'd put those together, and I don't think it is an illegitimate charge to make at all. Now, there's an argument to be made that the charge gets thrown against him for things that are disputable. It's happening today because he referred to Kamala Harris yesterday as lazy, and certainly the Washington Post, I think, has a thing about how this is pushing forth a racist trope against Harris.
Oh yes, I pulled this up. Trump attacks Harris with racist stereotype, eyes extreme power as president. The racist stereotype is that she's lazy. I mean, what are we allowed? Am I allowed to say that she's lazy because I don't think she's done enough media interviews, and that she got out of actually even having to run in a primary or do any debates the way every other candidate has to do? What are we allowed to say?
No, I do think that point is fair. I think that Trump's history in the way that I just laid out is racist. I also think that the charge is made against him too frequently. And the lazy thing, of course, is filtered through the lens of all the previous comments. So if a Democratic strategist or someone supportive of Harris came out panicked about her campaign strategy and said, well, it's lazy not to be doing 2 campaign rallies, that person almost certainly would not be charged with being racist or using racist tropes by the Washington Post, the New York Times, or whomever. But, I mean, I understand why Charlamagne laughed when Lara Trump said that. That's my point.
I mean, the one, our to push back on what you said, the incident or the anecdote or example you gave that I think will inspire the most pushback, maybe from some people watching this, is the Charlottesville one, where there was even a kind of debunking that the fact checkers, I can't remember if it's Pointer or it's Snow, I think it's Snopes, pointed out that it's often just casually asserted that he was saying there were many fine people, including among the tiki torch wielding people at the statue, when really what he was saying is that there are people who are not racist who nevertheless think taking down statues is not a good thing to do, or is erasing our past, or that there's no limiting principle in that it's not going to stop with Robert E. Lee, it's Thomas Jefferson, it's Washington, it's everyone, and that's not a good thing. And I agree with that.
There's certainly a case for parsing those remarks, and I think they can be interpreted either way, actually. But I think that the problem in Charlottesville was he was far, far too equivocal about condemning people who were on the extreme right, who were engaging in blatantly intimidatory far-right behavior, marching with torches and so forth, and his overall thrust was to minimize the dangers of that.
I don't know if I agree with that on the Charlottesville comments. I do think later when he was asked about the Proud Boys at that debate, the stand back and stand by or whatever it was, that could have been a little stronger. How about stand down? Sure. How about no more standing? Sit.
Right, exactly. I mean,
on that case, I mean, I don't. I don't mean to sound like a Trump apologist today. I'm not a supporter of his. I won't be voting for him. But to give voice to people who are supporting of him, I think some of this is not really is just, well, in these cases he's reticent to call out people who support him. He's not someone to do the whole whoever David Duke is supporting. There's been Republicans in the past. I actually think it's Jill Stein this time around for the Israel policy. And then what you often have is the figure who gets the endorsement from the racist Nazi person says, I unequivocally reject this person's support. Donald Trump is not someone to reject support from people who are supportive of him. Maybe it'd be a wise thing to do. I don't know that reflects him being a racist, but just someone who is utterly, ruthlessly, politically calculating and will not denounce people who are pro him, even if he ought to, like Laura Loomer or those kinds of gadfly people who get him in trouble, or Rudy Giuliani for a long phase.
I mean, we've been through this on the other side, because when Obama first ran, firstly there was the whole Jeremiah Wright controversy, and Obama did ultimately disown him. But I am nearly sure, and people can check this on Google if because I'm going from memory, didn't Farrakhan endorse Obama in 2008? I believe Louis Farrakhan endorsed Obama, I think.
Yes.
And so it became this whole thing about, are you going to disclaim this and all of that. I think that Obama did appropriately distance himself from figures like that. And talking of Obama and talking of the charge of Trump racism, the birtherism thing, I mean, I understand that you're not here to defend Trump, to your credit, but surely the birtherism thing was just blatantly
bad.
racist.
What can I say? It was bad. And so is, I don't know why fighting about Kamala Harris about when she started referring to herself as black over whatever her other ethnicity background, Indian background, it doesn't, who cares, it doesn't matter. And
why are you reluctant to use the word racist about the birtherism thing?
I mean, it's not inherently racist to say that you don't, I mean, he could have made this claim about a white person being born somewhere where there was dispute over whether John McCain was born. Well, yes, but just because you've said something nasty or unfair or bad against someone who is black doesn't necessarily mean you're racist. I mean, I would say this about a lot of police brutality cases, like George Floyd case. Absolutely wrong and appalling what was done to him. The police officer's actions were wrong, and I believe contributed to his death, the officer Derek Chauvin. I think it was right to charge him. It touched off an entire racial reckoning in this country, even though there's not a shred of evidence that it actually had to do with race. No one has presented evidence that this police officer was racist or that he was targeted because he was black. Well, that doesn't make it any worse or better.
I mean, did that police officer murder any white people that we're aware of?
He's murdered one person, and that person happened to be black. But
you don't think there's any
But if the person... No, what if George Floyd was white and the same thing happened? This thing does happen to white people. There is a there's a disparity to some degree, although it is in cases exaggerated. If you look at the actual data, it's not that stark. To make the accusation of racism, I need to to hear not just disparaging of an individual, but some pattern of disparaging people, an entire race of people because they're black.
But in the case of policing, there's a pattern of police violence against black people. Not to say that police violence against white people is zero, but that the greater preponderance of police violence is against black
people. Right, that's
people.
because black people are more likely to be low income, and low income people live in areas where there's more criminal activity, and there's more policing because there's more criminal activity. Now, I'm not pretending there is no racism. There's certainly a greater aggression, and then there are policies like stop and frisk that went on in New York that was racist on its face because it was stopping people even when there was no underlying suspicion, and it was clearly disproportionately stopping black people, even again with no underlying reason to do so. So that, I would say, was a racist policy. But just there are race-based disparities in our country that don't, that I would say do not have to do with like immutable actual differences or characteristics of the races, but have to do with, are more correlated with poverty and those things, which because of historical inequities involve more minority people.
Yeah, I mean, just to circle back to the Obama thing, I mean, I just think that you can't, to suggest that Donald Trump implied or in some instances accused Obama of having been born elsewhere, and that it was just happenstance that Obama was vying to be the first black president, or maybe had become the first black president by that point, to suggest that there's no correlation between those two facts.
I mean, I'm not going to like jump out of my seat to fight you on that. No, that was not a racist remark. It's a bad remark. He should not have done it. It initially made most people in the Republican Party turn against him. It was not treated very positively even by conservative people until Donald Trump won his war over the Republican Party, and now it's his, and now people don't like to criticize him if you're a conservative. More to come still on Rising today. We're going to be talking about Joe Rogan is going to sit down with Donald Trump. Maybe he'll ask him about some of these things. We'll get into it. More Rising right after this.